Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're taking a look at episode 39 of Cocktail Party Chemistry, and it's all about okadaic acid,
It's a good one.
which I've got to admit I had never heard of before listening to this episode.
Yeah, it's not exactly a household name.
But it's a fascinating molecule, and this episode really digs into it and gives us all the details.
Yeah, and it's a perfect example of how these tiny molecules can have such huge impacts. Like we're talking about a single molecule here, and it can just wreak havoc on a cellular level.
Yeah, that's what really struck me, is just how potent it is.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they talk about in the episode is that it's a phosphatase inhibitor.
Right.
So
Big word.
big word, yeah.
But it's actually a pretty simple concept once you break it down. So basically, think of a cell like a bustling city. You've got all these different processes happening all the time, all these different things moving around. And to keep everything running smoothly, you need a really efficient system for delivering and removing packages.
Okay, I'm with you.
Right. So in a cell, those packages are phosphate groups. They're like little tags that get attached to proteins, and they can either activate or deactivate those proteins.
Oh, okay, I see. So they're kind of like on-off switches.
Exactly. And the couriers that are responsible for removing those phosphate groups are called phosphatases. They're enzymes that basically go around and take those tags off.
Okay, so they're like the cleanup crew, making sure everything stays in order.
Precisely. But here's where okadaic acid comes in. It basically tells those phosphatases to go on break. It inhibits their activity.
So it's like okadaic acid is throwing a wrench into the cellular postal service.
Exactly. You got it. The normal flow of phosphate groups gets disrupted, and that can have a cascading effect on all sorts of cellular processes.
Yeah, it's like a chain reaction.
Right, and that's what leads to all the dysfunction that we see with okadaic acid poisoning.
So speaking of dysfunction, the episode mentions that okadaic acid is produced by dinoflagellates.
Ah, yes, the tiny creatures of the sea.
And I've always associated those with those bioluminescent waves you see in the ocean, those beautiful glowing waters.
Right, right. They can be responsible for that for sure, but they also have a darker side.
Okay.
Dinoflagellates are notorious for producing some seriously potent toxins. Okadaic acid is just one example.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a pretty light show out there.
No, there's a whole chemical warfare going on beneath the surface.
It's like a microscopic arms race.
Exactly. And some of these toxins are incredibly dangerous.
Like, what else do they talk about in the episode?
Well, they mentioned ciguatoxin, which you might have heard of. It can cause ciguatera fish poisoning.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, that's a nasty one. You get it from eating contaminated fish, and it can cause all sorts of neurological and gastrointestinal problems.
Yikes. Okay, so we got to be careful what we eat.
Definitely. And then there's saxitoxin, which is responsible for paralytic shellfish poisoning.
Paralytic shellfish poisoning. That sounds serious.
It is. It's actually one of the most potent neurotoxins known to science.
Yeah.
It can cause paralysis and even death.
Wow. Okay, so these dinoflagellates are not messing around.
No, they're not. They're producing some seriously powerful stuff.
So we've talked about the sources of these toxins, but I'm curious, how does okadaic acid actually cause harm once it gets inside a cell? We talked about those phosphate groups getting stuck, but what does that actually do?
Well, it all comes back to those signaling pathways we talked about.
Sure.
Those pathways are incredibly intricate networks that control pretty much every aspect of how a cell functions.
Right.
Everything from growth and division to communication with other cells relies on these delicate signaling cascades.
So they're kind of like the control panel for the cell.
Exactly. And when okadaic acid disrupts the balance of phosphate groups, it throws those pathways into disarray.
So it's like hacking into the control panel and messing with all the settings.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So it's not just a minor inconvenience, it's a full-blown cellular meltdown.
Pretty much, yeah. It can have some pretty drastic consequences. Yeah, it's a fascinating but also a bit scary example of just how powerful these tiny molecules can be.
Yeah. And it can manifest in some pretty uncomfortable ways, too.
Okay, so let's talk about those real-world effects. What happens when someone is exposed to okadaic acid?
Well, the most common way people get exposed is through contaminated shellfish. And the symptoms, let's just say they're not pleasant.
Right. I think we can all use our imaginations there.
Yeah, we're talking about severe gastrointestinal distress, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, the whole 9 yards.
Not fun.
Yeah. So definitely something to be aware of. But you know what I find really interesting is how this episode highlights the duality of toxins. Like they can be dangerous, obviously,
Right.
but they can also be valuable tools for researchers.
Absolutely. That's what makes okadaic acid so intriguing, by studying how it disrupts those crucial signaling pathways. Scientists can actually gain a deeper understanding of how those pathways function
Uh,
in both healthy and diseased cells.
so it's like using okadaic acid as a magnifying glass,
Exactly.
allowing researchers to zoom in on these complex cellular processes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And by understanding those processes at a finer level,
Yeah.
we can start to explore new avenues for treating a wide range of diseases.
Okay, now this is where my ears perk up. Give me some examples. What kind of diseases are we talking about here?
Well, remember how okadaic acid disrupts those signaling pathways that control cell growth and division?
Uh-huh.
That makes it a particularly interesting molecule for cancer research.
So it could potentially be used to stop or slow down the uncontrolled growth of cancer cells.
That's the hope. And it's not just limited to cancer. Because okadaic acid affects such a fundamental cellular process, its research implications extend to a whole host of conditions.
Like what?
Well, they talk about neurological disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease.
Wow, so this one tiny molecule could potentially unlock treatments for some of the most challenging diseases we face today.
It's certainly a possibility. And what's even more fascinating is that okadaic acid isn't just giving us clues about how to treat diseases,
Hmm?
it's also helping us understand how those diseases develop in the first place.
Now that's what I call turning poison into knowledge.
Exactly.
But before we get too carried away with all this potential, I have to ask, are there any ethical considerations when it comes to working with such a potent toxin?
Absolutely. Whenever researchers are working with potentially harmful substances,
Right.
there are strict safety protocols and ethical guidelines in place. And of course, the potential benefits of the research must always be carefully weighed against the potential risks.
Right. It's a good reminder that scientific progress shouldn't come at the expense of safety or ethical considerations.
For sure. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the broader context of marine toxins. We've touched on a few examples like ciguatoxin and saxitoxin. What else should we know about these fascinating but potentially dangerous substances?
I'm all ears. This whole world of marine toxins is really starting to capture my imagination.
Well, one crucial point is that the prevalence and distribution of these toxins can be influenced by a variety of environmental factors.
Like what?
Things like water temperature, nutrient levels, and even ocean currents.
So it's not just about the presence of these toxin-producing organisms,
Right.
but also about the conditions that allow them to thrive.
Precisely. And as our climate continues to change,
Right.
we're likely to see shifts in the distribution and abundance of these organisms, which could lead to increased risks of harmful algal blooms and seafood contamination.
That's a sobering thought. It seems like understanding these toxins is becoming increasingly important not just for our own health,
Right.
but also for the health of our oceans.
It's a complex interplay between ecology, chemistry, and public health.
Yeah.
As we continue to explore this fascinating world of marine toxins, we're gaining a deeper appreciation for the delicate balance that exists in our natural world.
And I have to admit, this episode has definitely piqued my curiosity about what other potential therapeutic applications might be hiding within these toxins. It's like a whole untapped pharmacy just waiting to be discovered.
It truly is. And that brings us to a final thought-provoking question for our listeners to ponder.
Okay.
Given the vast diversity of marine and fungal toxins out there,
Right.
each with its own unique mechanism of action, what other medical breakthroughs might be waiting to be unlocked?
It's a tantalizing question.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what other secrets nature holds and what other solutions might be hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, it really does make you wonder. You know, we tend to focus on the harmful side of nature, but this episode really shows us that there's also this incredible potential within these toxins.
Right. It's like this hidden world of possibilities.
Yeah, and it reminds us that even these dangerous substances can help us understand and maybe even heal our bodies.
Mm.
It's amazing what researchers can do. You know, they can take something that's inherently harmful and find a way to use it for good.
Yeah, it's like turning poison into medicine.
Exactly. And it's not just about developing new drugs. It's also about understanding these fundamental cellular processes.
Right. The basic mechanisms that make our bodies work.
Yeah. And every time we learn more about how a toxin like okadaic acid works, we're getting these valuable insights into how our cells function.
And that knowledge can then be applied to so many different areas of research.
Absolutely. From drug development to understanding how diseases develop, it's all connected.
So to wrap things up, it seems like the main takeaway here is that okadaic acid is a dangerous toxin,
For sure.
but it's also a powerful tool for scientific discovery.
Absolutely. And its story really shows us how knowledge is interconnected and how nature is so delicately balanced.
Yeah, and it highlights the importance of human curiosity, that drive to explore and understand the world around us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up our deep dive into okadaic acid. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of microscopic algae and cellular intrigue.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, stay curious.